Okay, good morning. So we're going to start doing decimal multiplication. So what I wanted to go over first was our decimal place value chart because you're going to need to know where the place value spots are for each number. And I'll show you why in just a second. So whenever you're paying attention to place value and trying to figure out where each position is, with decimals, the first thing you need to do is make sure you know where the decimal is at. What I would recommend is start with where the decimal is at and line them up in those positions accordingly. So, in the decimal multiplication that we're going to be doing, dealing with the tenths place with the THS. We're going to deal with the hundredths place, and we're going to deal with the thousandths place on the right side of the decimal. So, those are all smaller than one whole. On the left side of the decimal, right next to the decimal is the ones place. To the left of that is the tens place, the hundreds place, and the thousands place. You aren't going to be dealing with multiplication that has 10,000s, 100,000s, millions in the equation itself. So really what you're going to need to pay attention to is the thousands place for whole numbers, hundreds, tens, ones, and then your decimal position. Okay, so that's the decimal place value chart. The next thing, and you guys all have that in your notes as well. The next thing I want to discuss is the powers of 10 because that's going to be something that's important to this lesson. And with the powers of 10, remember it's just a pattern. So if we start with 10 to the first power, all that really means is that your answer is just 10 by itself. You're not multiplying it by anything, okay? Now, if we go to 10 squared, that means 10 to the second power. If you remember, that really means 10 times 10, which is equal to 100. Okay, 10 to the third power, that equals 10 times 10 times 10. And remember, 10 times 10 is 100, times 10 is 1,000. Okay, we'll do one more, 10 to the fourth power. That is actually equal to 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. Because remember, the 10 is the base number. That's the number you're multiplying by itself. The exponent tells us how many times you're multiplying this base number by itself. So 10 to the fourth power is equal to 10,000. Up at the top, you may have to deal with 10 to the 0 power. And all that means is 1. Okay? And then I wanted to remind you of one more thing. The exponent tells you how many zeros are going to be in the answer when you're dealing with powers of 10. So the exponent of 0 tells us there are going to be 0 zeros in the answer. The 1 exponent tells us there's going to be 1 0 in the answer. The 2 exponent tells us there's 2 zeros in the answer. 3 exponent, there's 3 zeros in the answer. And the 4 exponent tells us there's 4 zeros in the answer. So I wanted to remind you of the powers of 10 as well, because you are going to see some multiplication with a base number and an exponent, and other times you're going to see the answer, so 10, 100, 1,000. So you're going to need to understand that 1,000 is equal to 10 to the third power, okay? And again, this is in your notes as well, under the powers of 10 notes. So what you guys are doing today is you guys are going to be doing decimal multiplication with powers of 10. And it is a little bit different than whole number multiplication with powers of 10 because you're not just adding zeros anymore, okay? So what you guys are going to get for this activity today, you are going to get one of these charts, okay? And this chart is just showing us the place values, okay? So what we're going to do first when we're multiplying decimals is we're going to organize those numbers into the place value chart to make sure that we're in the right position in the first place. So what you're going to do with this is you're going to put this inside your slip cover that should be in your bucket. If you don't have a bucket, let us know. Or if you don't have one of these in your bucket, just let us know. You're also going to need your colored dry erase marker, and I need to grab one of mine. So that's the first step. You're going to put your place value chart in here. You're also going to be getting one of these sheets, and it has a bunch of numbers on there, okay? Now these numbers I've measured and they fit right into these boxes up here, okay? So you're gonna cut out these boxes first. You can go ahead and pause the video until everybody's done, and then cutting them out, and then we'll move on. Okay, now that you've cut out all your numbers, I'm gonna zoom out a little bit here. Okay, now that you've cut out all your numbers, what we're gonna do is we're gonna really practice how to line up our numbers correctly as far as decimal multiplication. I'm just trying to move a little bit. There we go. Okay, so all of my numbers are here. You guys have two sets from 0 to 9. So you have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 2 times, okay? And the reason is because you're going to use one set up here, and then what you're going to do is you're going to show the movement down here. Now, when you're multiplying decimals by a power of 10, what ends up happening is you are making the number 10 times bigger, 100 times bigger, 1,000 times bigger. So if we look at this chart right here that we just drew, right, you're going to have a situation where you have to multiply, let's say, 4.8 times 10, or 4.8 times 10 squared. So these are the equations that you're going to see when you're multiplying by powers of 10. But you need to understand why. So what we're doing is when we have 4.8, what we're really doing is we're making 4.8 10 times bigger, okay? And then with 4.8 down here with the second equation, you're making it 100 times bigger, okay? So what you're really doing is multiplying by 10 or 100. And I wanted to show you both because, like I said, you're going to see some where you're multiplying by this answer, 10, 100, 1,000, or 10,000, or you're going to see it with the exponential number right here, okay? So let's start. So let's do 4.8 times 10, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to line up our numbers here. We have a 4 in the ones position, and 8 in the tenths position. So we have 4.8, right? We are multiplying by 10. And if we remember, I'm just going to write that here. And if we remember from our place value chart before, from the beginning of the year, when we have our ones position, right? To go to the tens position, it takes 10 ones to get 1 10, right? So when we think about our relationships between these numbers, we know that as we move to the left, each place value spot gets 10 times bigger. From the tens to the hundreds, that gets 10 times bigger. Hundreds to 1,000, 10 times bigger. Thousands to 10,000s, 10 times bigger. So we need to remember that relationship when we're multiplying by powers of 10, okay? So really what that's telling us is when we multiply 4 times 10, right, we're really going to move that one position over to the left, because the 4 is going to be 10 times bigger. And we know that because of the place value chart that we move one position to the left. So we're going to put our new number 4 down there. Now, same thing with the 8, right? To go from tenths to ones, it takes 10 tenths to get 1 whole, okay? From hundredths to tenths, it takes 10 hundredths to get 1 tenth. And we should remember that also from our models where we colored in the tenths on the hundredths chart. We had 100 little squares and we colored in 1 bar. So 10 hundredths is equal to 1 tenth. And then 10 thousandths is equal to 100th, okay? So you're going to need to remember that relationship. And since we know that the 8 is in the tenths position already, and we're multiplying by 10, that's going to take the 8 one position over to the ones position, okay? So what we're left with is our answer. And remember, a whole number is a decimal, right? So just because there isn't a 0 here doesn't mean that there's not a 0 here. It's just a placeholder 0 so you can keep your decimal and not get confused. So if you really need to, you can put that placeholder 0 in the tenths position so you can show yourself that it is a whole number, 48.0, okay? So on your worksheet, you'll just write next to the answer. Sorry, my face is in the way. You'll just write down 48, okay? So now the next equation says 10 squared, right? So we know that what that really means is 4.8 times 100, right? So if we look at our place value chart, we're still starting with 4.8 as our starting number. We're just going to use our eraser to erase those arrows because we're moving on to a different multiple, right? We're no longer multiplying by 10. We're really multiplying by 100 now, okay? So what that means is if we think about our powers of 10, right? We know that 10 squared is equal to 10 times 10. So our equation really says 10 squared. We know that that's 10 times 10. So what that tells us is this 4 in the ones position, we need to multiply that by 10 twice. So what that really means is 4 times 10 times 10. So we're moving it 2 positions this time. So we're going to put our new 4 here, okay? Now, 8 in the 10th position, so 8 tenths, is the same situation because you're still multiplying it by 10 squared or 10 times 10. So you're going to move that 2 positions to the left because it's getting bigger, right? With multiplication, your product is always bigger than what you start with. So we're going to move that. We're going to skip over the decimal. We're going to move it 8 times 10, 1 position, 8 times 10, 2 positions. Okay, so that's 48. But now we have blank spots, right? And what are we supposed to do with those blank spots, right? We know that we can always add a placeholder 0 to the end of this 4.8, 4 and 8 tenths, because it's not going to change the value, right? Just like we did with that 48 on the last equation, you can, you have really a placeholder 0 here, right? So if we move this 0 2 positions as well, you get 1, 2 positions. And so, sorry, I'm trying to find my 0. What that really means is when we have 4 and 8 tenths or 4 and 80 hundredths, right? Because that's what 8 tenths is equal to, 80 of those tiny little squares, right? Now we have a whole number of 480. So when you're multiplying by a power of 10, what you're really doing is you're moving these numbers to the correct place value spot based on the powers of 10 that you're multiplying, okay? All right, let me go ahead and erase that. And then I'll bring up my equation right here. So really, when we have 4.8, we're moving the 4 over 2 place value positions because we're multiplying by 100, right? So the answer was 480. Here is something that I want you to keep in mind, okay? When you have an exponent or you have exponential form, okay, that tells us that we need to move the 4 over 2 place value spots. So you don't necessarily need to solve 4.8 times 100 and then follow the number of zeros, right? But you can use this exponent to tell you how many times you're moving the 4 over. And the 4 would move over to the hundredths position, just like we did on that chart, okay? Next, we're going to be doing, after we're done with decimal multiplication of powers of 10, and we go through that whole decimal multiplication situation, then we will go into division of decimals divided by a power of 10. And we'll talk about that more later. So have fun. Make sure that you cut out carefully. You do not have to cut the numbers out like on the line. Just go next to it. The point is really just so that you can fit it into those boxes and move it. When you're done, please check the floor around you. Make sure there's no numbers that are on the floor. So what you guys are going to do is you're going to go through 6 different equations where you are practicing this movement of decimals. And we're not moving the decimal, we're moving the numbers to the correct place value position based on the powers of 10 rule. And you can use the number of zeros in the equation if you have like 10, right? You can move the numbers 1 position to the left because you're multiplying it by 10. And then remember, 10 times 10 is 100. 100 times 10 is 1,000. 1,000 times 10 is 10,000. So just keep those place value rules in your mind as well. I also recommend that you write down these arrows to show your relationships, right? Because you know 10 times 10 is 100. So if you start out with 4 thousandths times 100, you know you're going to need to move that 2 positions because 4 thousandths times 100. 4 thousandths times 10, 4 thousandths times 100, which actually equals 4 tenths, okay? So you're going to show that movement, and you're going to use your colored dry erase marker for this activity. So that way you can actually see the movement of those numbers. When you are done with the activity, you're done with all 6 of the equations, we're going to hand you a baggie, okay? And you're going to put all these cutout numbers inside your baggie, and you're going to put it inside that math manipulatives bag inside your bucket. So that way we have it in the future for decimal division. If you need help, make sure you ask us.